Welcome to my 1000 Topic English channel. Today, we'll be learning an English story to enhance our listening and writing skills. Subscribe now and join us as we explore amazing English words, vocabulary, and grammar to help you grow and succeed. Don't forget to hit the bell icon so you never miss an update. Drop a comment below and let us know what you'd love to see next. It was a sweltering summer afternoon, the kind of day where the sun hung heavy in the sky, baking the pavement and turning the air into a thick, oppressive blanket. I was standing at a bus stop on the outskirts of the city, clutching a crumpled map in one hand and a water bottle in the other. My shirt stuck to my back, and beads of sweat rolled down my temples. I was lost, hopelessly, utterly lost. I had been traveling for weeks, backpacking through the country on a shoestring budget. It was supposed to be an adventure, a chance to see the world and find myself. But at that moment, all I felt was exhaustion and frustration. My phone had died hours ago, and the bus schedule I picked up at the train station might as well have been written in another language. I had no idea where I was or how to get to my next destination. The bus stop was deserted except for an elderly man sitting on the bench, his face shaded by a wide-brimmed hat. He looked to be in his late 70s, with weathered skin and a pair of round glasses perched on his nose. He was reading a newspaper, seemingly unfazed by the heat. I hesitated for a moment, then walked over to him. "Excuse me, sir," I said, my voice hoarse from dehydration. "Do you know when the next bus to Maplewood comes?" He looked up from his newspaper, his eyes kind but sharp. "Maplewood," he repeated, his voice gravelly but warm. "That's quite a ways from here." "You're in the wrong part of town, young lady." I groaned inwardly, feeling the weight of my mistake. "Great," I muttered under my breath. "Just great." The man folded his newspaper and set it aside. "Where are you headed?" he asked. "I'm trying to get to the Maplewood Hostel," I explained. "I have a reservation there tonight, but I must have taken the wrong bus earlier. Now I'm stuck here, and I don't even know where here is." He nodded thoughtfully, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn notebook. He flipped through the pages, his fingers moving with practiced ease. "Ah," he said after a moment. "You're in Greenfield. The bus to Maplewood doesn't come through here. You'll need to get to the Central Station." I sighed, feeling the frustration bubble up inside me. "How far is that?" "About 3 miles," he said. "But in this heat, it's no walk for a young thing like you." I slumped onto the bench beside him, feeling defeated. "I don't know what to do," I admitted. "My phone's dead, I'm out of cash, and I don't even know if I can make it to the hostel before dark." The man studied me for a moment, his gaze thoughtful. Then he stood up, brushing off his trousers. "Come on," he said. "I'll give you a ride." I blinked up at him, surprised. "Really? You don't have to do that." He smiled, the lines around his eyes crinkling. "I know I don't have to. But I want to. It's not every day I get to play the hero." I hesitated, my instincts warring with my desperation. He seemed kind, but I'd been taught to be cautious around strangers. Still, something about him, the gentleness in his eyes, the calmness in his voice, made me trust him. "Okay," I said finally. "Thank you." "Really?" He led me to an old pickup truck parked a few blocks away. The paint was faded, and the interior smelled faintly of leather and tobacco. He opened the passenger door for me, and I climbed in, setting my backpack at my feet. As we drove, he introduced himself as Henry. He told me he'd lived in Greenfield his whole life, working as a mechanic until he retired a few years ago. He spoke fondly of the town, pointing out landmarks and sharing stories from his youth. I listened, captivated by his warmth and the way his voice seemed to carry the weight of a lifetime of memories. When we reached the central station, Henry parked the truck and walked me inside. He helped me buy a ticket to Maplewood and even gave me a few dollars for food. "Take care of yourself, young lady," he said as we stood on the platform. "The world can be a tough place, but there's still a lot of good in it." I nodded, feeling a lump rise in my throat. "Thank you, Henry. I don't know what I would have done without you." He smiled, patting my shoulder. "You'd have figured it out. You're stronger than you think." As the bus pulled away, I watched Henry through the window. He stood on the platform, his hands in his pockets, looking as steady and unshakable as a mountain. I thought about his kindness, how he'd gone out of his way to help a stranger without expecting anything in return. It was a small act, but it had meant the world to me. A lasting impact. That encounter stayed with me long after I left Maplewood. Whenever I felt lost or discouraged, I thought of Henry and the kindness he'd shown me. It reminded me that even in the darkest moments, there are people who care, who are willing to lend a hand without hesitation. Years later, I found myself back in Greenfield. I had been traveling again, this time with a clearer sense of purpose. I decided to look for Henry, to thank him properly and let him know how much his kindness had meant to me. I asked around town, describing him to anyone who would listen. Finally, I found someone who knew him. "Oh, Henry," the shopkeeper said, her face softening. "He passed away last year. But he was a good man, always helping folks out, no matter what." I felt a pang of sadness, but also gratitude. Henry may have been gone, but his kindness lived on in the stories people told about him, in the lives he'd touched, and in the way he'd inspired me to be better. As I left Greenfield that day, I made a promise to myself: I would pay Henry's kindness forward. I would look for opportunities to help others, to be the stranger who makes a difference. Because sometimes, all it takes is one act of kindness to change someone's world. And that, my friends, is the story of the kindness of a stranger.